Belarus is a former Soviet landlocked country in Eastern Europe with a surface area of 207,600 square kilometers. There is Latvia in the north, Lithuania in the northwest, Poland in the west, Ukraine in the south, and Russia in the east. Although I entered as a former Soviet country, in fact Belarus has not fully emerged from the Soviet influence. Although it gained its independence and was named the Republic of Belarus, this is a country with a population of approximately 9.5 million, which is described as the last dictatorship in Europe in the world press. Lukashenko, who has been the country's president for 29 years, responded in 2012 when Germany's then Foreign Minister Guido Westerwelle addressed him as a dictator by saying, "It's better to be a dictator than gay." 8 months after this incident, he said with his own mouth that I am the last and only dictator of Europe. Belarus is a country divided into 6 regions. Its capital Minsk is independent with special city status and is not part of any region. It is located in the middle of the country. The country has a flat geography in general. More than 80% of it is covered with plains. Due to the absence of mountains in the country, there are almost no precious metals. This is Europe's largest country without access to the sea. If we look at the democratic structure of the country, approximately 84.9% of its population of 9.5 million consists of Belarusians, 7.5% is Russian, and the rest consists of other nationalities. About 90% of the population is Christian, 2% belongs to other religions, while 8% is either atheist or does not believe in any religion. But these are official data. Polls conducted today claim that 40% of the population is not affiliated with a religion. In general, religion does not play a big role in the Belarusian society anyway. The biggest reason for this is the restriction of religious practices and beliefs by the state and the encouragement of atheism during the Soviet period. This is the 6th country with the highest female population ratio, with 53.8%. The employment rate of women of working age in the country is higher than that of men. While 34% of the registered unemployed are women, 66% are men. If we look at the daily life in the country, there are 2 official languages: Belarusian and Russian. This place has a society in which the Russian language actually dominates. Russian is the customary language not only of minority groups but also of Belarusians. Although about 85% of the population is ethnically Belarusian, only 20% prefer to speak Belarusian, and most of them cannot read or write the language. For many years, this language was popularly represented as the language of the rural people. The people revived their national values after independence, but a year after Lukashenko came to power, he held a referendum bringing back the old state coat of arms, replacing the country's flag with the same Soviet-inspired ones. Except for big cities like the capital Minsk, there is hardly anyone who can understand English. The currency of the country is the Belarusian ruble. The minimum wage is 554 Belarusian rubles, about $120 per month, while the average salary is $250. If we look at the capital Minsk, it's around $450 to $500. Only 20% of the people in the city earn more than this amount. In rural areas, the average salary drops to $200. Minsk is one of the cheapest cities to live in Europe. Even though the salaries are low in the country, the suspensions that the state shakes to the people relieve people, such as free healthcare, free education, cheap electricity, or financial aid for families with children. Belarus does not have a policy that promotes worker power. Local people cover all the employment gap. So the country is one of the countries where unemployment is low with a rate of 2.5%. It is a place of population loss with a low birth rate. Birth rate per woman 1.4. The state is running some programs that encourage childbearing to prevent the population problem. At the birth of the first child, an allowance of 3,521 rubles is received, while for each subsequent child, 4,929 rubles are received. Until he reaches the age of 3, the monthly allowance of 605 rubles continues. Large families with 3 or more children have the right to request freeland for the construction of housing from the state and are also exempt from land and property taxes. Mothers with 5 or more children receive a lump sum payment when the youngest child turns 1 year old, along with a state award called the maternity medal. Independent of all aids, an application called Family Capital has been carried out since 2015. Families with 3 children receive a one-time state-supportive 29,950. Some Belarusians whose financial situation is not sufficient find the solution by having children. It is also the 4th country with the highest divorce rate. Many people in the country have a wooden house in the village with an inheritance from their elders, and they have a land where they can grow potatoes, onions, many vegetables and fruits, and keep cows, pigs, and chickens. Many people share their home either with friends or family. Young couples in particular often stay with their parents because they can't afford the rent, and it's not uncommon to have 3 generations sharing an apartment. By the way, Belarusians do not enter the house with shoes. There are some rules for keeping pets at home. A family has the right to keep a maximum of 2 animals in one flat. Cat and dog owners must register their pets if they are over 3 months old and pay a so-called pet tax 4 times a year. By the way, ice skating and ice hockey have a great importance in Belarusian culture. Almost every city has ice skating rinks. The country is known today as the Las Vegas of Nature Europe. When gambling was banned in Russia, gambling tourism was formed here. In addition, for many years Belarusians have been named as the people who consume the most alcohol in the world. In recent years the situation has changed somewhat, but this is still the country with the highest number of alcohol-related deaths. 18.8% of the people suffer from alcohol. In the country, drunks were even banned from taking the subway after a drunken man fell on the tracks. In addition, Belarusians are one of the 3 peoples with the lowest average life expectancy in Europe. In general, they do not have a very good diet. Potatoes are the main food source in the country. So much so that with 178.3 kilos per person per year. This is the country where the most potatoes are consumed in the world. Many poor people own cottages called dachas with a small plot of land where they grow up to half a ton of potatoes a year to feed their families. Belarusians have many superstitions. In general, beliefs that have been in existence for years. They say that after a guest leaves your home, you shouldn't clean your home until they reach theirs, or you'll cut them out of your life forever. If a young girl sits in the corner of the table, it is believed that she will not be able to marry for the next 7 years. If you step on dog poop while walking on the street, it will bring you luck. If you put an empty bottle on the table, bad luck will find you. If you wear an outfit wrong, it means that something will hurt you that day. To get rid of this, you have to take off your clothes and put them on again by stepping on it. Maslenitsa, the oldest Slavic holiday celebrated since the 2nd century, is one of the most important holidays of Belarusians and is celebrated just like a carnival. It is forbidden to eat meat during this holiday, which has its origins in pagan tradition and maintains its importance, even though the beliefs of the Slavs have changed with the adoption of Christianity. Only fish are allowed and they consume dairy products. Meanwhile, Belarus ranks 5th in the world in milk production per capita. Tourists who visit the country say that Belarusians do not smile much, that they look stern and angry from the outside, and that when they smile at someone they do not get a response. But they add that this is more culturally so, not out of malice in general. The capital Minsk has suffered many catastrophic destructions and occupations since 1505. And at the time of the Second World War, 85% of the buildings and all infrastructure in the city were destroyed. Everything has been rebuilt. This is the most important reason why the roads in the city are wide and the city has a regular structure. In general, today there is hardly any traffic problem in Minsk. Meanwhile, tourists coming to Belarus must register where they are staying if they are to stay in the country for more than 5 days. Otherwise, they have to pay a fine when they leave the country. Belarus is a country with many rules. Fear of the law underlies the country's security. The number of police officers patrolling the streets is quite large. This is the only country in Europe where the death penalty still exists. The motives are usually murder, treason, and terrorism. Penalties for crimes are incredibly harsh. To understand Belarus, it is necessary to understand Lukashenko. 6 presidential elections have been held so far, but it has always been impossible for anyone else to win in these elections. Each time those who came before Lukashenko either gave up or were dissuaded. Their records were not made and they were banned from running or imprisoned on various charges. In almost all elections held to date, Lukashenko has received 80% of the votes. But none of these elections, except the first and Lukashenko's presidency, are not recognized by the red countries you see on the map due to allegations of irregularities. So how did Lukashenko come to power? By gaining the trust of the people in the first place. When the country gained its independence from the Soviet Union in 1991, it faced an economic crisis. Because it was able to survive until that day with the support of the Soviets. When all the factories and workplaces went bankrupt one by one, the people took an attitude against the government that left the Soviets. Lukashenko, on the other hand, made the promise of the enforcer by modernizing the old Soviet system, and the Belarusians voted for the change of order. Thus, Belarus became the first country to survive the economic crisis among the countries that left the Soviets. 2 years after Lukashenko came to power, he held a referendum increasing his own power and influence and weakening the parliament that was to control him. With this referendum, he also tried to increase his mandate from 5 to 7 years. Today, the opposition has 0 seats in the parliament. All of them are supporters of Lukashenko. Lukashenko led the country's economy to financial crises one after another by running an excessive current account deficit. As a result of the sanctions imposed by the West, and Lukashenko's aging, some of the people believed that he could not recover the situation they came from and that there should be a change. The latest 2020 election has created chaos in the country. When Lukashenko got 81% of the votes, the people took to the streets and argued that the elections were fraudulent. More than 30,000 people were detained, more than 7,000 people were arrested. In May 2021, Lukashenko forcibly landed a Ryanair plane from Greece bombed for Lithuania via Belarus to Belarus, on the pretext of a fake bomb report because it was carrying an opposition journalist. Then he had the journalist arrested and sent to prison. Thereupon the European Union banned all planes departing from Europe from landing in Belarus indefinitely, and many countries including the United States joined this sanction. Belarus is the least visited country in Europe today, as the only way to go to the country without a direct flight is to fly only from these 8 countries. Moreover, travel from these countries usually consists of only a few flights per month. Meanwhile, the European Union has imposed a series of sanctions on Lukashenko and his supporters, freezing their assets and barring them from traveling to the European Union region. It is impossible for Lukashenko to step on these lands today. Behind Lukashenko's stance that defies Europe lies his allegiance to Vladimir Putin. With the establishment of the Union State between the two countries in 1999, the understanding of one nation, two states emerged. Until recently, there has been no border control between the two countries. Since 1995, it was possible to cross without a passport. Belarus is highly dependent on Russia economically. It exports more than 70% of its products to Russia, and in return it receives cheap oil, natural gas, and raw materials. As a result, the deterioration of Russia's economy directly affects Belarus. The Belarusian people are a people who sacrificed a quarter of their population for the Soviets during the Second World War. In addition to the people who died, millions of people were left homeless at that time. Today, almost everyone has relatives who gave their lives and made various sacrifices for Russia. Finally, although not much is known, Belarus was affected by the Chernobyl disaster in 1986, 70% more than Ukraine. A quarter of the country's land has been polluted. 1/5 of the arable land was destroyed. Much of the southern border was abandoned due to fallout, and some areas were even closed to the public. In the affected areas, radioiodines accumulated in the grasslands and were consumed by cows and passed into products for human consumption. People's life expectancy has dropped by 5 years. Despite this tragedy, Belarus is known as the lung of Europe. About 43.2% of its land is made up of forests, and 12.3% is peat bogs that absorb carbon dioxide. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and follow for more such videos.